You know, I really like Fire Emblem supports. I do. One could say that I am in support of supports. The system has started to come, I don't necessarily want to say under fire per se, but from what I understand, some YouTuber made a video about why supports are bad. And a lot of people now have adapted that as their opinion. And I don't think it's cool when that happens. So I'm going to be a YouTuber and give an opinion and hope that you adapt it. And that's that I think Fire Emblem supports, the entire system, the way that they're written, the way that they're handled, is really, really good. And I think one of the best characters I can use to show that is this guy. Look at him. Doesn't he look like he's someone worth listening to? I think he is. So please, allow me to elaborate. So, I should probably start with why I love Fire Emblem support systems. Because Fire Emblem is an ensemble cast. Unlike other JRPGs that just have, Tales of really like 6 party members. Final Fantasy can hover around 8 to 10, depending which game. Fire Emblem, and this is like, Sacred Stones, I believe, is the shortest cast in the series, but it might be Echoes, has over 30. And yet, because of the support system, I can tell you something interesting about every single one of these characters. All of them have fleshed out personalities. A lot of them have their own backstories. And it's all in these supports, told in a way that honestly puts some characters in regular JRPGs that have whole storylines to shame. And every time you unlock a new support chain, at least to me, you get this rush of like, oh man, what am I gonna learn? What great interesting thing about this character am I about to discover? And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's a very simple and, almost silly support. Like, say, Rennick and Dozla, where Rennick just really wants to not have to deal with Dozla and Larshel. Nothing serious is learned, but it's just goofy. Just silly. Fun. But then, there are also more serious supports. And Kyle is one that I'm going to use to explain that. I like the fact that Fire Emblem can make a character like Kyle, who looks like every single other super serious stern knight type. Like Lance, like Kent, like Oscar. Lance, Kent, Oscar, Kyle, none of them are the same. They have the same mold, that being the serious knight who takes his job really much, to the extreme. Probably has a stick up his ass somewhere. But that doesn't really apply to Oscar. See, right there, it doesn't even really apply to Oscar that much. He's just serious. And all of them get to be unique. I know a lot of people hate Fire Emblem. It's like, oh man, all these Fire Emblem tropes get reused. Complaining that writing is made out of tropes is like complaining that trees are made out of wood. Like, yeah, nothing original is under the sun. I'm not looking at a character like Dussel and thinking, wow, a general who betrayed his country? That's just ripping off Cecil Harvey from Final Fantasy. I'm not looking at a paladin like Seth and going, wow, a paladin? That's ripping off Cecil from Final Fantasy. I'm not looking at Erica who uses a sword and going, wow, a sword unit? That's really ripping off Titus from Final Fantasy. Like, no. That's not how that works. And the fact that Fire Emblem can use all of these molds and consistently craft characters through their interactions and their supports that stand out on their own and are distinct from one another, I think is really, really cool. I really, really enjoy it for that. Now, one of the criticisms the support system has, and I feel like this is the biggest one, is that everyone gets reset to 0. Like, Kyle, after having his A support with Ford, would go back to the same kind of Kyle from the C support with Ephraim, to Serene, to Calm, Lute, etc. And I don't fully understand why that matters. I feel like people think that character development is the only way to make a good character. And I get it. There is something innately satisfying about seeing a character start off with some kind of negative quality, you know? Maybe they're selfish, arrogant, just naive, and then growing into something more capable, more likable, more enjoyable. Character development is a great way to write a character. Emphasis on a great way to write a character, not the way to make a good character. The fact that people go back and want character development from supports, it's like getting angry at your fork because you can't use it to eat soup. You're not using the right tool for the job. Fire Emblem supports are very good at exploring relationships, and then from those relationships, you can get a better gleam of how a character works. Maybe they have an interesting backstory, and because you understand the character's relationships, you understand the character and can either laugh at them if their point is to be silly, like, for example, this young lady, or maybe you can cry if someone's meant to be kind of depressing. Take your pick between these two. And sometimes, you just get in a character's head, learn more about them, and they're enjoyable. Now let's look at Kyle here. Kyle shows up, you think, okay, he's green, serious knight. Who would you talk to with? Ephraim, maybe? That is the wrong support. I'm doing great here. So the C support with Ephraim comes up. And this is another thing I like about supports. They kind of, by default, have their own little 3-act structure. And the fact that you don't get to see them immediately after one another, some supports make really good use of that. For example, so this one starts and it looks very typical. Kyle is like, Ephraim, you don't charge on the front lines, are you kidding me? And Ephraim's like, fuck you, I do what I want. It's a very simple knight worried about the Lord's safety. Starts very standard, not that interesting. Kyle's behaving exactly as you would expect. So, he gets Ephraim to say, alright, I'll let you lead the charge. And the line that it ends on is Kyle saying, I gotta stop him before he gets himself killed. I know he's not gonna listen to me. Alright, so how's this gonna go? Is Ephraim actually gonna listen to Kyle? Or is Ephraim gonna tell Kyle to F off, you goddamn moss head? So then, you play maps, you have Kyle and Ephraim around each other, and you're like, what's gonna happen next? You go to the B support. And here, Ephraim's kind of disgruntled because Kyle did get his way. Kyle is like, anyone can stop Ephraim from running into a castle with 4 dudes. And Ephraim doesn't like this because he likes to do fight, yeah. So we have a conflict here. The support is showing, hey, Kyle, come on, Ephraim doesn't like this. I also like that Ephraim's like, I'm gonna revoke that order, I'm the prince. And Kyle's like, no, don't. Like, what authority do you have, Kyle? So again, it's standard, but it's getting you interested. There's conflict here, you want to know how it resolves. That's what supports are really good at. And A is where it suddenly goes from just, alright, sure, to something really interesting. We're in the flashback chamber, that's funny. So, Kyle's apologizing. Right away, intrigue is made. Then, okay, Kyle's injured on the battlefield, and it's here we actually get to explore the relationship between Kyle and Ephraim. With Ephraim saying, treat this man as you would my own brother, help him regardless of cost. This bit is what makes Kyle different than the other knights of his archetype. Lance would not call Roy his family. Kent would not call Lynn his family, unless you have them married, but that's different than what Kyle's describing here. And we get a really good line about Ephraim here, through Kyle's support, mind you. So if you're in here for Kyle, you get something about Ephraim. All Ephraim knows is relationships about fighting. He's detached. He doesn't know how to rule people. He doesn't know how to talk to people. I could not feel to afford any affection for anyone. Just Seth, Ford, and you, Kyle. I've always thought in that ellipses before he says Kyle, Ephraim's about to bring up Orson's name, but he stops himself. And a little headcanon there. So, what does this support actually say, right? Like, if I were someone trying to explore Kyle's character, I've learned, first of all, the relationship between Ephraim and all of his knights are much more familial than other knights. Like, say, I don't know, in this very game, Inez and Tana do not have this kind of relationship with Serene, Vanessa, or Gilliam. You've learned something unique to Kyle. And from this one support, just this one support, you start to pick at Ephraim's character. It leaves something in there with an impact as well. Because now, when Ephraim struggles to start relationships with Tana, Larshel, and Myrrh, suddenly it makes sense because he doesn't know how to have a friendship that isn't about fighting. He doesn't know how to form relationships, so when he's fumbling the bag with Tana, of course he doesn't know how to act. He was raised attached. You've gleaned information about Ephraim's character that makes you more interested in him. Now you're like, maybe I should read his Ford support, or his Dussel support. These supports about him fighting, and alongside his knights and people close to him. And for Kyle, you've learned a bit about his familial relationship. You're like, wow, he and Ephraim are that close. Are him and Ford that close? And then you look up Ford, and it's a whole support about he and Ford's friendship and how they're more like brothers as well. It really nails the idea that you want to learn more about these characters from just one. And that's really cool about supports. It's like popcorn. You can't just eat a single thing of popcorn. You've started learning about Kyle, you started learning about Ephraim, and now you want to look at his other supports, even the ones that are a little strange. Like, oh, he supports with Ford and Ephraim. Alright, that makes complete sense. You can understand how that happens. What the fuck does he and Serene have to talk about? Calm, Loot. These aren't people you would expect Kyle to talk to. And those supports are often the best ones. Like Marissa, for example. Why is Calm? Calm's like the weird one. Why are you talking to Calm? It's honestly, in my opinion, Marissa's best support. About her inferiority complex and her father. It has her entire backstory in there. I'd recommend reading it if you like Marissa. But going back to Kyle, where is Kyle? Kyle's right here. Did Kyle develop as a person, really? In that Ephraim support? Did he grow as a person? Did he undergo some life-changing journey? No. We just saw what he was like when he talks to Ephraim more candidly. Did that make it a bad support? Does the fact that Kyle didn't develop as a person make him a bad character? No. He doesn't need it. Character development is not the end-all, be-all if the character is written to not develop. And I think that's the problem that people have with the lack of character development, is they look at characters, and I apologize to, I don't know, the 20 Yarn fans in the world. A character like Yarn, who has a really fucking cool concept for a character, by the way. The idea that he is a member of an almost extinct race, but like a warrior race. So, in order to preserve his race, he's an absolute coward. Because if he dies, his race is gone. That makes complete sense. But in being a coward, he's kind of looking back on what makes his race his race. That is an awesome idea for a character. But because he's in Fire Emblem supports, he can never develop out of being a coward. He has to be a little wimp. Always. And I think people are pointing the finger at the wrong thing when they see characters like that. They're thinking, oh, Yarn is the problem. Not Yarn, the supports are the problem because Yarn can't develop. In my opinion, no. Yarn's the problem because he's trying to be a square in a circle hole. He's the wrong tool for the supports are the wrong tool for a character like Yarn. he is someone that belongs in something like Final Fantasy or Tales of, where he could be a coward, maybe he looks up to someone who gives him a bit of courage, and then he can have this sort of bond with that character as they grow and mature as people, and then in a pivotal moment, when someone needs to step up, Yarn would get proud and courageous and defend the people that he used to be afraid. Like, you could really do something with that. So I think that the problem isn't the support system. It's the fact that some characters are written for it that it doesn't work with. And that's fine. Like, you can complain about that. I'm not saying that you can't complain or have problems with the system. I think the problem is with the character, not the system. The other problem that people have with the support system is the fact that... how to phrase this? Oh, right, I know exactly the way this. They don't like that some people instantly vanish into your barracks. For example, looking at Sacred Stones' cast. Erica's a main character, Seth has a lot of dialogue, Ephraim's a main character, and then Larshel... where the hell is he? And Inez. Where's Inez? There's. Those are the only ones. That's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters out of this whole cast of 33 that are relevant to the story? Some people have a lot of problem with that. They're like, oh man, everyone should get their own character arc. And I'm gonna sound, I don't want to say conceited, but it might be how this comes off. You don't want that. If you think you want every single character in a Fire Emblem game to have their own arc in the story, trust me, you don't want that. Because that would absolutely murder the game's pace. Because, imagine here, this is Sacred Stones, the smallest cast, again, one of in the series, who's got 33 characters. So if all 33 of those characters in the story had to have their own arc, that means you would have to write, because you can't just give them one individual scene, you would have to write over 100 scenes, probably, of each of these characters doing something to have their own little arc and, development, while also trying to make a narrative, and that would grind everything to a halt, rather than what Fire Emblem does, and picks a select few to focus on. How do I know the pacing would suffer? Look at Kaga! Fire Emblem's creator, Shozo Kaga, after making Thracia 776, the game most infamous for just not having characters that really speak, went hog wild in the other direction. Tear Ring Saga, Vestaria Saga, will have constant scenes that have nothing to do with anything just to develop the characters. Now that sounds cool, and it is, but that's also how you get a random 2-hour dinner in the middle of the game that just doesn't progress the plot in any way. It's how you get the constant, 30-minute banquet scenes in Tear Ring Saga that don't advance the game in any way. And it leads to an ending for Tear Ring Saga and Vestaria Saga. It leads to an ending that's so slowly paced, it makes the Lord of the Ring endings seem like Chainsaw Man in comparison. That, while some people, like myself, are okay with that, a lot of other people would start and read and read and read and read and just get bored out of their gourd. Because it doesn't progress anything. You're sitting there watching, you're essentially reading a visual novel at that point. And again, some people like visual novels and would be fine with that, but Fire Emblem, I'm dying. Fire Emblem, one of its strengths is its pacing. An hour into, I don't know, a Pokemon game, depending on the Pokemon game, I might be at the first gym, probably not. Probably still catching, I don't know, Pidgey and Pidove. An hour into Final Fantasy, it depends on the Final Fantasy, but normally you're just kind of wandering around town, not doing too much. An hour into Fire Emblem, a kingdom's been invaded, You're fighting for your goddamn life. You are in the thick of it like that. Very fast. 3 houses and, well, really 3 houses is the exception to this. But Fire Emblem's strength is its pacing. The story moves really fast, and I don't think people realize how cool that is. Because JRPGs, by default, we all accept they're a slow genre. We accept that things kind of go at a slow pace. And we're alright with that. We're alright with literally that image, Mission 1, find a cat. Mission 100, kill God. We're fine with that. Fire Emblem doesn't fuck around. And I think that people don't realize that if they had to stop and just have all these characters show up and have this whole la-di-da, that the pacing would suffer, and suddenly Fire Emblem would start to become as slow and dialogue heavy as those other games. Which, again, I like those other games, but why create a problem that was already solved? By having supports locked away like this, they don't fuck with the main pacing. There's something off to the side. Now, the other complaint that I hear is... what was I about to say? Oh, that the characters, because the supports can be gotten whenever, they can't talk about current events in the story. I do not understand this complaint at all with modern Fire Emblem. It was a complaint for a while. Don't get me wrong, I get that. But when you finish a map in 3 houses or Engage, do you, like, not talk to anyone? Just, like, look at Dedue in the face and then walk away? You can talk to them. They all have lines of dialogue outside of supports that have them talking about what's going on right now. Sure, they're not the most in-depth conversations, but you can still glean a lot of really good shit from them. I remember when everyone on the internet was going crazy because of Dorothea's line about Ferdinand.
The bridge was full of soldiers, and they all died. And Ferdy was there. We killed Ferdy, Professor. He used to be our friend. Do you remember those days?
That was her talking about an event that just happened. And it worked. It made you feel emotions, and it was about relevant concepts. So I don't get that complaint at all. I think you're looking at support to be... yeah, like, that's weird now that I think about it. People are upset that everything is locked behind supports, but then complains about things that happen outside of supports for not being in supports. Make up your mind. I do agree that the system does have its flaws. Like I said, some characters do need development and can't get it. And this is more a gameplay thing than the actual writing thing. But unlocking them in the GBA games fucking sucks. Tellius is good. And then, like, they're okay to unlock now, by having characters do things next to each other. I think it's fine. Could be easier. But I absolutely love supports. Alright? I have made 80 character analysis videos for this series. And I think, you might have gathered, I think Fire Emblem makes really good characters. And supports, as they are, do a great job of making you want to learn more about characters and see characters you might not see before. Like, for example, going back to that Marissa thing. If I like Marissa, and I see she supports with Calm, I might want to try to support her with Calm. I might want to be incentivized to use Calm and see what that support's about. And maybe if I use Calm and he gets good level ups, I'll use a character I wasn't thinking about using otherwise. I just think that people want supports to be something they were never designed to be, because supports work perfectly for Fire Emblem's style of writing. And Fire Emblem's style of writing might not be for everyone. If you want those games where characters develop and grow, that's fine. There are plenty of other games that do that. Trails does a really good job at the exact thing people want Fire Emblem to do, and that's develop a bunch of characters that don't matter to anything. But Trails also has the benefit of being a 20-year continuous narrative where they can have a minor NPC fish for 3 games and have an arc. Love you, Annabelle. And Kenneth. Like, look at that. I remember the names of the random fishing characters. Go play Trails if you want that. Go play Trails in general. Fantastic series. But, I don't know. This was not scripted. I think you could probably pretty easily tell. I kind of came at this with a rough outline. I just think that Fire Emblem supports are better than people give them credit for. I think the flaws of the system aren't really flaws that much. People just don't realize how good supports are at what they do. And I wanted to gush about that. I don't know how to end this, so